Okay, so we're joined today by Brian Johannesen. He's an Americana musician based in Iowa City, and he is the founder of Dead Coast Presents. Brian, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Elly.
Yeah. So firstly, could you tell us what Dead Coast Presents is and what you've been up to with that
Yeah.
project recently?
Well, Dead Coast Presents I started when I moved back to Iowa City from Nashville, um, in I don't know, 2016, I think. Um, I came back from Nashville where I really had an education and learned a lot about singer-songwriters and met a ton of amazing singer-songwriters who, if you get them in a room where it's quiet and people are paying attention, they will just like blow your mind.
Mm.
And that's a hard thing to do anywhere. And at the time, Iowa City had some spaces that would work for it, but nobody was really like focusing on a listening room type environment.
Mm.
And so I just thought, I'm going to start doing a thing where I bring songwriters through town that maybe people don't have never heard of, but I'm going to put them in a position where they're in a room, and whether it's like 4 or 50 people in there, they're going to be quiet and listen. And I think
Mm.
that's something that I love as a musician. That's something that I'm always looking for when I'm booking a tour. And it doesn't really matter how many people are in the room as long as they're listening. Like, we can have a great time, and like the art can do what it's supposed to do. And so I just wanted to create that environment in this town. And so initially I got together with Katie at Trumpet Blossom, and I was like, I'm back. I wanted to do a monthly show, like the first Thursday of every month, just do a Dead Coast show that I played every single one, in an effort to like bring some people out for these musicians who nobody's ever heard of, and then I would book two
Yeah.
songwriters on each one. That's a really hard thing to maintain once a month, especially with like a
A
fixed day.
lot of
So
work.
like the tour had to line up so they came like the first Thursday of the month. Otherwise, it like wouldn't work. So I kind of scrapped that idea after about, I think we did like 6 or 7 of those, and then just started booking shows that were listening room shows at mostly at Trumpet Blossom, and whenever they would come through, and just calling them Dead Coast Presents shows. So that's kind of how it started. Obviously, not doing a whole lot of that right now. Actually, the last thing I did
Mm.
in public was a Dead Coast Presents show at the Trumpet Blossom. We had Dave King and Julian Lodge played there on March 13th. It was a sold out show, and it was like the scariest thing in the world because like Corona, but like it was, I think the next day everything was
Mm.
done. Like it was like the last day that like it would have been possible to do that show. And I was on the phone with like the Johnson County Board of Public Health, like just like, can I do this? And they're like, yeah, I think it's fine. And like I brought hand sanitizer, and everybody got a squirt.
Mm.
Um, and we had sold like 85 tickets, and only 60 people showed up, which was kind of perfect. But so the last thing I did was a Dead Coast Present show. But shortly after, obviously it became clear that in-person shows were not going to happen. At that point, we thought for a couple months. Um, I got together with Taylor Bergen, who runs CSPS in Cedar Rapids, and we started doing a live stream show every Wednesday from both of our Facebook pages. So from the CSPS Hall Facebook page and the Dead Coast Facebook page, that we both like kind of co-book,
Mhm.
called Boundaries. And the idea was to just get a wide variety of artists to come in, and artists to come in and do their thing. So there was, we've had visual artists, we've had like dance, we've had theater, and obviously a
Yeah.
lot of music too. And so it was just kind of a way to throw like, still get people work, still throw some work at people and all of this. And, it's donation based. I honestly have no idea if anybody's made any money from donations from the thing, but it's just a way to
Yeah.
keep busy. So that was every Wednesday. Now it's every other Wednesday, now that people are ignoring the pandemic and going out. So it's just kind of like,
Yep.
okay, well, maybe not everybody's looking for a stream every Wednesday, so we do every other Wednesday now. That's what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Cool. Yeah, I was like so impressed when I started seeing boundaries happen with just the amount of people, like how well programmed it was. And yeah, it seems like all my friends were on it, and I had fun watching some of them. I saw Blake
You
Shaw's.
got to come on
That
it.
was
You
great.
got to come play one.
I know, I need to. I like the live streams really scare me because I'm already such a spaz like on stage, but something about when there's no one in there,
Yeah,
I just go the extra mile of being an uncomfortable person. So
I've only played. I think I've done 3 live streams, and they're all. It's just so weird to finish a
yeah.
song and there's just nothing, and you're
You're
like,
like,
well,
"Okay."
that was that song.
I know.
Thanks for
It was, like,
listening.
super
Um,
emotional and stuff, and then you're like,
yeah,
"Okay, so,
yeah, and then
next."
you're like squinting at the computer or whatever, and you're like, oh, Bob's here. Hey, Bob.
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Please give me money. Um,
I made the
it
mistake
was
of trying to read the comments as I went, and then I'd forget
oh
what I
yeah,
was doing, but it's, like,
yeah,
just natural to try and read them.
yeah. I had to like what I did was I the third time I finally learned like back up away from it and just like you can see the comments coming in, so at least like it's working.
Yeah.
But I can't read them, so it's just like I'm just gonna power through and play the set. No,
Wise.
I'll get back to y'all later. Yeah, it's a strange. It's such a bizarre way to, especially like for me, like my songs are like a lot of them have stories to them, and I've kind of like developed a stage show that involves storytelling before the songs and explaining the songs, and there's like jokes in them, and like and so like I'm used to like having a room to read to decide what stories to tell. When I tell a joke, it just like you expect to hear somebody, at least somebody go like,
Mhm.
but like it's just like here's a joke, and I'm in my basement. Okay.
Yep.
Um, yeah,
I actually didn't know that was the inspiration for Dead Coast, and I really appreciate that because I've been to many shows, especially like house shows where I have friends performing and it's like they're kind of just alone on the acoustic guitar and like with a microphone. I mean, you kind of have to be like, everyone, shut up, like,
shut up.
time to be
Yeah,
quiet. And you could just tell like it's so uncomfortable and hard for them. And yeah, sometimes you have to really consciously create the spaces where it's quiet and people are attentive and it's not just a
right.
party. So I
Yeah,
definitely
it's a
appreciate
hard
that.
yeah, and it's a hard thing like as a performer because you don't want to fight it. You don't want to say something. You don't want to like kill the
Mhm.
mood by being like, "Hey, can you guys shut up?"
Yeah.
Um, but it is like a driving like it's I think I've done enough shows where people are not paying attention and are talking that I can kind of go into a zone and it's just like, all right, I'm just gonna power through this set
Autopilot.
and like
Yeah.
find the 4 people who are listening and like direct everything I'm doing at them.
Yeah.
Um, and like it shouldn't really be on the artist to do that. It should be a culture in the venue, I think. And so like from that perspective, it's worked really well. I've only had one show where I had to tell people to be quiet, and it was
Mhm.
for a good reason that there were so many people there and everybody was like drinking and having fun that they were talking. They weren't
Yeah.
just like being rude. It was just like, hey, can and they're like, oh yeah, sorry, sorry. So it's been really cool to, you know, even the shows where there's like 3 or 4 people there, which happens sometimes, to just like you're just completely in that person's world. And that's my
Yeah.
favorite part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would rather play a show to 3 to 4 people who are obviously listening than a room of 100 people who are, like, drinking
Yeah.
and talking.
I think that's a common thing. I think a lot of artists feel that way. I have a good friend, Sam Lewis, who's a musician in Nashville, and he got to go on tour opening for Chris Stapleton
Oh.
on his first amphitheater tour.
Oh
And
my
so he was
gosh.
playing to 3 to 5,000 people a night, but he was solo acoustic, and
Oof.
he was like, it was the worst gigs, like because it's just like the crowd is so loud that like you can't
Mm.
even think. And like you look out and you can
Mm.
find a few people listening, but you're just like, what am I doing? And it's funny because Stapleton had stolen his band, his rhythm section. So Stapleton's bass player and drummer used to be Sam's. And so like they were on the road and he just kept being like, can you guys come play with me? And there was like some sort of
What?
union, musicians union, like they couldn't play two set and like he couldn't pay them or whatever. And finally for the last like 4 gigs, they were like, we're just gonna come play with you. I don't care. And so like the last 4 were like good. But like before that, he would just like try to be as personable and funny as he could on a huge stage by himself and then
Oof.
try to sell as much as he could afterward. But he was like, yeah, I'd much rather play to 10 people in a quiet room than do that again.
Wow.
It's a wild
I did
time.
not know I'd be getting tea about Chris Stapleton on this podcast. I officially love my
I
job.
say stole. I mean, I mean, he obviously was like, "Hey, I'm very big and I can pay you," and they were like, "We want to do that," you know. So
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure it was all copacetic. It's
yeah,
I would understand that. But, just any insight on Chris Stapleton's life, I'm a huge fan. So, it's kind of crazy
everything
to
I've heard about him is
third
he's
degree
an
know him
absolute.
now.
Yeah, there you go. He's an absolute sweetheart from everything I've heard about him. Like he's just a great guy. So I don't mean to cast shade on him.
Seems like a gem.
Yeah.
We're here for it. Okay. So you released your second full-length album earlier this year.
Hmm.
What has that experience been like given were you able to like tour at all or how did
Um,
that play out?
it's been mixed.
Yeah.
The timing of it. So it was supposed to come out last spring, and then it was supposed to come out in the fall, and I just kept pushing it back because I wanted to do it right. You know, I think a lot of us sometimes are like, I recorded this thing, I just want to get it out, and then maybe rush the mastering process and then just to make an
Mhm.
arbitrary date that you set in your mind, and all of that. So kept pushing it back and I was actually really pleased. It came out January 31st. So it kind of felt like the perfect time because it's after the holidays and after people had recovered from the holidays and like are just starting to maybe start going out. And it's a very like winter sounding record or winter spring sounding record to me. So it was kind of like the right time to just put it out. There
Yeah.
wasn't a whole lot else going on. Um, and the release shows went really, really well. We played at the Mill, RIP, um, and then in Chicago that release weekend. And then I did a few dates with Middle Western. I opened for Middle Western for a couple of dates the next weekend. And that was it. That's all I've played on it. And so I had a lot of good stuff booked for the spring and summer. Like I was
Yeah.
really excited about it. I was playing some festivals and playing like this awesome show in New York, and
Mm.
like it felt like the wheels were rolling for the first time in a while, and then it just like right before it started just got cut off,
Yeah.
um, which is a huge bummer. I mean, is it like if I'm going to be selfish about it, like this is like a horrible time for this to happen for me.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know. I've been trying to see it as time to do stuff that I never have time to do.
Mhm.
Um, so like I started my own like podcast webcast thing with my friend Ryan Anderson, who produced the last both of my solo records, and we just like talk to people in the music business every Sunday at 4 o'clock on Facebook Live, and put it up on YouTube afterwards, and just like talk about how crazy everything is
Mm.
for musicians right now, or for managers or agents or whatever. So it's been cool because we've talked about doing some sort of podcast or something that talks about the music business, but it was just like we don't want to do just like a podcast that doesn't have direction or really a reason other than we want to
Mhm.
talk about the music business. And now like that we have this pandemic that is ruining everything about the music business, it's like the perfect time to be like, how has your life been ruined? Oh, cool.
There's a way to find a silver lining.
Yeah, but I mean, like the focus we try to always get to, like, in what ways can we have this pandemic change our business for the better?
Yeah.
So, in what ways can we restructure everything on the other side of this? Um, so it's not so. So the, I mean, I think everybody knows that the music business has been like broken for decades, and it's getting worse in the sense of like it's getting harder to make money
Mhm.
and make a living doing it. Um, and so a lot of our discussions are around like what's a positive thing that's going to come out of this. And so like a lot of people think that this might break up the big agencies or might break up Live Nation, you know, and everything will get more localized and more independent and more, you know, people who less of a machine is hopefully how this turns out is kind of the big
Hmm.
takeaway so far.
Is
I was just
that
rambling. I don't even remember what your question was.
do you no, I liked where this is going. Do you think that's what's going to happen? Because I haven't been as up to date on my arts music business news, but I was sort of afraid it would be going in the opposite direction where, small venues are.
It could. I mean, if I mean the scary stuff is, you know, if the independent venues in this country don't get some sort of federal assistance, up to 90% of them will close. If this drags on for 6 months, which it will, you know, we're not getting out of here in 3 months in
Yeah.
any way. Um, so yes, there will be a lot of closures, but I think it'll provide a lot of opportunity to build the venues or restructure the venues in a way that we want them to look. Um, so that's one side of it. I don't
Yeah.
think. I mean, did you see the Live Nation news this week? So Live Nation released their new, what's it called? Like their terms of
Mhm.
contracts with artists in the pandemic world, and they are crazy. I mean, in my opinion, it's absolutely insane. It puts all of the risk on the artist. So if you are an artist and you cancel a show with Live
Yeah.
Nation, you are theoretically you're going to have to pay them double what your guarantee was. So if you got booked for $10,000 to play a show with Live Nation and you cancel, you owe them $20,000, which is insane.
Jeez.
Um, if Live Nation cancels the show, you only get paid 25% of your guarantee. Um, just some crazy stuff. And to me, that's like a flag, right? And that's saying, oh, Live Nation's not doing great. Like
Yeah.
they're trying to figure out a way that they can continue to do this. And I hope
Hmm.
that that a combination of that and artists being like, I'm not signing on to this. I'm not going to agree to these terms will result in maybe Live Nation splitting up into multiple companies, you know, as
Hmm.
they continue to lay people off, as people continue to get laid off in this, that they're going to start forming their own boutique promotion companies and agencies and management companies
Hmm.
with a bit more um, personal touch. So rather than the corporate machine of Live Nation's going to buy your tour for $2 million and we're going to play 30 dates and we don't care if Kansas City doesn't do well because New York's going to do great. And it's like a big, you know,
Yeah.
something where like every show matters, every artist matters, what they want
Mm.
matters, you know, just kind of shrinking it down. So that's what I'm hopeful for. But it could go the other way.
Okay.
It
Yeah.
could go that at the end of this, there's one promotion company and one agency, and we're all told what we're
Yeah.
supposed to like.
Seems like they're
But
like two apocalyptic options. One is the monopoly is even more of a monopoly, or B, it
mhm,
all just gets so destroyed that we build it back up the way we
yeah,
want it to be built.
that's yeah.
Oh,
I mean, it is it's not will it be destroyed? It's being destroyed right now, and
yeah,
it's going to
yeah.
have to be rebuilt in some way. So how is it rebuilt is the question.
Okay,
And I
yeah.
hope it's local, regional, boutique. I hope it just gets super independent, and we have just like a wealth of, because so much art is being created right now that doesn't have a space to be debuted or
Yeah,
put out in the public. So hopefully at the other end of this, there's just like a renaissance of quarantine art and a bunch of small companies to promote it. That's my dream for the
totally.
future. Yeah.
Totally. My partner and I were talking about it a little bit, and I'm hoping that just with um everyone so fiending being not being able to go to shows, not being able to see the artists they love, that when the time comes, people will be so excited and so ready for the community and shows to come back that it'll there'll be so much strength that I don't know, it'll be more
Yeah,
possible.
I hope so. I mean, I hope that the attitude has changed. I don't know. Last Sunday, not yesterday, but I don't know when this is going to come out, but a couple weeks or last week, the New York Times Sunday magazine put in there a very flawed poll, but it was a poll that showed the top 5 most essential jobs and the top 5 least essential jobs. And the
Mm,
top 5 essential jobs were obvious. It was, doctors, nurses,
yeah.
stuff that obviously is very essential. People who work in grocery stores, and hawkers for whatever reason. People who just like hawk goods and sell goods was one of them. But the number one least essential job was artist. And number 2 was telemarketer. So they thought telemarketers were more important than artists. And I think, and my initial reaction was, what have you been doing in quarantine? You've been watching TV and reading
Oh yeah.
books and listening to music. Like, who do you think makes this stuff?
Mhm.
And why don't you, why do you clearly value the art, right? So you have a subscription to Netflix, you have a subscription to Spotify or Apple Music. You don't mind giving them the money, and they are seen as an essential service, but not
Mm.
the people who make the art. And so I'm hoping that as we are all forced to stay home and probably engage with art from home in a way that we never have before, it will translate into a greater appreciation for artists and places that present art and higher attendance numbers and all that. I hope so,
Yeah.
but who knows
What
when
an
that'll be
interesting
and how
point.
that'll look. But yeah,
The revolution is nigh.
it's here. Let's
Well,
burn it
at
down.
the risk of being totally depressing, maybe not depressing, but maybe we should talk about the mill for a second.
Sure.
Um, what are your thoughts and feelings? So, the mill LLC, not the actual building, right? But the
Hmm.
establishment that is the mill, after 58 years, has announced is closing,
Yes, they will
I believe.
not.
Um,
The people who own it are not going to continue the business. It's basically what it is.
okay.
So it is. The hope is that somebody will come along and save it, right? Which
Yeah.
I feel fairly confident in. Although it's a very weird time to buy a music venue.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot. I guess there's a lot of variables there, but I think so. Chris Wiersma, who's on the Mission Creek programming staff, put up a
Mhm.
really good post on Facebook about the mill and its closing, and he kind of, in his salty way, um, pointed out that, you know, this isn't because of the pandemic. This is a long time coming, and one of the we should find the post and put it up for people to see. But like, it was really well, it was really well written and really well, I think, righteously outraged that people, once a place gets named an institution, people start to take it for granted, and they start thinking it'll always be there. So they only go when it's super convenient for them, when the stars align just right.
Mm.
So they start going to when I was in college, I would, and I'm guilty of this too. When I was in college, I would be there literally just 5, 6 nights a week, and just to hang out. And if there was a show, I would go to it. And if there
Mhm.
wasn't, I would just hang out. And obviously, life is a lot different for me right now than 10, 12 years ago. But I didn't I didn't go to enough shows there. And I think a lot of people didn't go to enough shows there for it to be sustained. So like all the people who are rightfully upset that it's closing and potentially will not reopen, um, how many shows did you go to? What did you do to keep it afloat while it was around? Um, how many times have you been at the mill and you think, this is what Chris has said, wow, this is incredible. Where is everybody?
Hmm.
Like where you're like, why aren't there 150 people here to see this show? Why is it 20?
Mhm.
Um, and so like I think it presents an opportunity to think about our historic arts presenters and our institutional arts presenters in this town, and think about how we can support them while getting something back. These places aren't going to stay afloat with like, oh yes, I think the mill should exist. I'm going to write a $20. I'm going to do a $20, $100 donation
Yeah.
and help keep them afloat. Like that's fine, but that's not going to keep them afloat. Going there, being part of it, being part of the culture and the experience of witnessing art is the whole point of those
Mhm.
kinds of places. So hopefully, um, hopefully we don't. If it comes back, hopefully we learn our lesson on that, and we'll go support the mill, but also Gabe's and the Englert and the yacht club and the places that have been around forever doing this stuff. We also
Right.
like it didn't garner the same press, but Uptown Bill's closed too, and Uptown Bill's
Mm.
has forever been a place for music that is also a safe, sober place for people,
Yeah. I
and
didn't
was a
even hear
huge
that.
part of the community. Yeah, I mean
Dang.
it was really early on. I think that was in March. Like they almost
Yeah.
immediately were like, we can't survive this. Um, and it was like a place that I was always like, I work at Little Village too, and it's right down the block. And I was always like, I need to go to Uptown Bill's more, and then I just didn't. So it's on me as much as it's on anybody else. But
Yeah.
wah, wah.
Well, it seems like a lot of the progressive change that we'd like to see happening in our music industry as a whole and Iowa City music is a, a change in the local culture of the music scene, I guess. So beyond, you know, going to more shows and being more active in those spaces, what do you think on a local level we could be doing to support our artists right now?
Yeah, I mean, right now, um,
And in the future.
obviously,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, right now, obviously, if you have the means, buying records or prints or anything you can from local artists is the number one way directly from them, um, is the number one way. So if you want to pick up that book that came out by a local artist, like now is a great time to do it. Or if you want to pick up a record that came out that you haven't had a chance to pick up, hint hint, now is a great time to do it. But okay, so that's like one. Let's say you don't um you're hit by this pandemic in the way like a lot of other people are, where you don't have a steady income anymore and you're pinching pennies. I could totally understand that. One of the things that I don't see as much as I used to is like the evangelizing of local art. And so it used to be that when there was a new artist in town that was good and people liked, I would hear about it all the time. I would hear about them all the time. It would be like, hey,
Hmm.
did you like see, dude, I was at the show the other night and I saw Penny Peach play and she's incredible. Like you got to check her out. And then I'd see it on Facebook and I'd see all this stuff. And like, it happens sometimes, but there's like not, I feel like if you're able to introduce the art to your friends, that is in some ways more important than buying a record. You know,
Mm.
expanding their fan base is a really big thing. And like, it doesn't always mean you have to be annoying on Facebook and like every day being like, you, check this out, check this out. By the way, nobody's annoyed by that. Like, that's all in your head.
Yeah,
Like,
also.
like people, if they don't want to see it, will just scroll past it. They're not thinking about, oh man, that guy's sharing way too much music. Um, but if like that's something, but also like the people around you and just like think about it and be like, oh man, Phil really likes this kind of stuff. I bet he'd like this band. Like, I'm just gonna like send him the SoundCloud link and be like, hey, check this out. Phil's not gonna be like,
Totally.
oh, this idiot sending me music, like if he doesn't want to listen
Thinking
to it, he
of
won't listen to it.
me.
Yeah. So that's like a huge thing. Now, beyond the pandemic, what we can do after the pandemic um, is a bit more, I think, community building. Um, maybe the problem is that there hasn't been like a space for this, like there was when I remember coming up in the music scene here when I was in college, which was like everybody was at the mill. That was what it
Mhm.
was, and we all went to Gabe's a lot too. And the Gabe's like Thursday night dance parties and all that stuff like were big,
Yep.
but like the home base was the mill, and you met everybody at the mill and you saw them weekly at the mill. And I'm not saying it has to be the mill or it even has to be a bar in general, um, but that was huge because I met my bandmates at the mill. Like, I was just like,
Mm.
I wanted to start a band, and I ended up meeting these people who played music, and they were like, yeah, I'll play music with you. And like, it's just like that kind of thing. And there were more bands then. And I think it was because we were all together. And so people would be in multiple bands and people would be hanging out with each other and stuff. And maybe I'm just old and I don't know that that's actually happening anymore. Um, or I'm just like not part of it anymore. But like, that was like a huge, huge thing. Building like spaces where artists can hang out and be social and talk about art and do that stuff and like find people who it's like, oh man, you like Hank Williams too? Like, what song should I listen
Mm.
to? Do you want to get together and play Hank Williams songs? And then that turns into a band. Um, and also like it was also way easier to have shows then, I feel like. And I don't know why. Maybe like money wasn't as big of a deal to the venues then because the other shows were doing better and floating the shows, but it just seemed like
Hmm.
every weekend there was a show with multiple local bands on it.
Yeah.
And so you got to see all the bands and you got to see all the people, and it was just kind of like it was more involved. It was just a very connected scene. Um
Yeah.
and maybe it is now, and I'm just like old and I sit at home and I think, why isn't anybody talking to me about music? But that
I
was like
think
huge.
I think in some ways it is, and in some ways it could be stronger. I think a lot of what you're talking about is happening more in, from my perspective, like house show
Yeah.
scenes. I do remember one time at the mill, it was like Elizabeth Moen is back in town. She like texted a bunch of us and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go do the open mic." And then I went and it was like Hannah Fry, Charlie Cacciatore, Sean Tyler, uh Flash Japan. Like
Yeah.
there was so many people, and that was just one night that I happened to be there for that. But I was like, this is amazing. Everyone was like sharing their new songs and stuff, and I was like, I wish this happened more. And like, I
Yeah.
don't know if Elizabeth hadn't galvanized us all going, if it would have. But yeah, to see
Right.
something like that being more consistent, um,
I think
I think I would benefit a lot from as an artist, and I think others
for
would
sure. And
too.
I think it just takes going, right? Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't like there was no plan to meet people at the mill. They were just like you would just go. And I think that it's part of an issue not only with this but in general for the music business and live entertainment, that back then there wasn't another option. Like if you were sitting at home,
Mm.
you could be watching whatever was on TV, which is always bad, or like reading a book. Like there was no Netflix. Like there was no you didn't have like the entire world like easily clickable
Mhm.
and like you could just sit on the couch. I just remember being like I'd go home and eat and be like I'm bored and then just leave. And
Yeah.
like now it's like I go home and while I'm eating I throw on 30 Rock or something and then like 4 hours later I'm like I just watched 8 episodes of 30 Rock. Like I didn't even think
True.
about it. It just like happened. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. I think like it's just going to take people going places and finding community there.
Yeah. Well, I think after
And
we're all banned to our bedrooms for a year, hopefully
yeah,
we'll just see desperation will kick in and everyone will be
yeah,
so desperate for social interaction that we can start building those scenes up even
yeah,
stronger.
yeah. And I think like I think it has to do with why the people you see right now who are straight up breaking, like not respecting the virus, who are
Mhm.
just like going and getting angry about it, about people telling them to wear masks and telling them not to go out. You see, it's like an older generation. And I think it's people who are maybe not as tied to Netflix and aren't going to be sitting and not understanding why how you just watch TikTok videos for an hour and a half. Like they're not doing that. They're people who grew up and were raised going out, and anytime you had time, you should go out and be with people. Whereas like younger generations, it's kind of getting further and further away from that. You're connecting
Mhm.
with people on your phone as opposed to
Yeah.
in person. But yeah, I don't know. That was just a thought that popped in my head.
Oh, the internet. How I
I don't
love
want
and
to shake my
hate
fist at the
her.
internet. I'm not like
I
I
know.
don't hate the
Oh,
internet
I
anyway.
personally have mixed feelings about the internet, so well, Brian, this we're gonna have some chopping down to do, but this was all. I guess I'll speak on behalf of everyone at the Angler and in our community. We love to hear what you have to say because you're obviously keeping up with what's going on, and you've had a lot of experience. And I'm always interested to hear what you have to say about what's going on in music.
Thank
So
you.
really appreciate you coming on. It's good
Yeah.
talking to you, and thanks for thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.